And as a reminder, what we're talking about with subliminal stimuli that do affect our behaviour is this green bit that I've superimposed on that line, where it's not reportable, but where we, as experimenters, as behavioural scientists, can detect a change in your behaviour. Now, we're not going to be selling you things. We're going to be looking for effects on memory tests, or preference ratings, or in some other measurable behaviour that we can use in the lab. And the most well-known example of this came from the early 70s, and it's called the mere exposure effect, whereby simply showing people things again and again induces a preference for them. So Matlin it was a learning experiment, presented Turkish-like words, followed Turkish sort of word orthography, but they weren't real Turkish words, and either showed them 3 times or 6 times, and then in a post-test presented them with some novel Turkish-like words that they'd never seen before. So there was a recognition test, but they also asked them to rate these words for both familiarity and liking as well. So what I've got here is real familiarity, whether they had seen them before or whether they hadn't seen them before, whether they were novel words. That's what's on these rows. And their subjective familiarity in the columns, whether they thought they had seen them before. These would be old, or whether they thought they hadn't seen them before, whether they were new. And the values there are how much they liked those words, where a high value means they like them and a low value means they didn't like the words. And what you can see is that for the ones they really had seen before, those values are higher than for the new words. They liked the words they had been exposed to several times, 3 times or 6 times, more than these Turkish-like words they'd never seen before. No reason to, and this was all carefully counterbalanced so that half the people saw one set of words and the other half of the people saw the other set of words. So this is why it's called a mere exposure effect, increasing people's preference for things. But interestingly, if they thought they had seen them before, the old column, whether or not they had, they rated them as nicer than if they thought they hadn't seen them before in the new column. So here, it's not just that seeing something lots of times makes us like it. We seem to read off, when we're asked to say, have you seen this before, we seem to read off an affective judgment of the stimulus and use that to determine whether or not we think we've seen it before. If we like it, we think, I've probably seen it before, it's familiar. Whereas if we don't like it, we think, it's novel. So the effect seems to work both ways. Now, of course, this was not done with subliminal shapes, or words rather. This was totally, all the words were there. They were supposed to be only some 3 times or 6 times. But this is the mere exposure effect. And it gives us a way of finding out if then stimuli we present subliminally can also create a mere exposure effect. And that's what Kunst-Wilson and Zajonc did in 1980. They showed irregular octagons. And here I've had PowerPoint draw some regular ones, just to confuse you, but they're octagons because they've got 8 sides. So these were pointy shapes. They were shown for 1 millisecond, which is much faster than you would be able to report them. 5 seconds each. And people perceivable only as a flash. Then they were shown old ones and new ones that they hadn't seen before and said, which of these do you like better? And which of them do you think you saw before? Recognition was at chance levels. They had no conscious recollection of having seen any of these shapes before. subliminally presented items were liked more, but only if people felt confident about their response, that they were sure they liked it. What the columns here indicate is whether they were sure about their decision, the dark black lines, or whether they thought, I have no idea, I'm just guessing. They were asking to rate their confidence in their judgment as well. And the middle lines are where they said, oh, I don't know, I'm half sure. So you can see that the seeing it judgments were at chance level. But if they were sure about their affective judgment, they liked it. If they were half sure, some measure of confidence, then they would like it. If they knew they were guessing, then they did not like it. So what this is showing is that we can get a mere exposure effect for subliminally presented stimuli, even when people can't report having seen the thing. So we're below the subjective threshold, but we're above the objective threshold. We're in that green area where it's worrying.